Dwayne Johnson is 50 years old, built like a real-life superhero, and he's literally played one on screen. But here's the question almost nobody actually asks. Take away the barbells, the Iron Paradise gym he ships to every film set, the 7-meal-a-day support system, and put him in front of the same functional standards a 50-year-old soldier has to hit. Would that bodybuilder physique actually translate? This isn't a knock on Johnson. It's a genuinely useful question for every man over 40 watching this, because most of you are training closer to his style than to a soldier's. The military calisthenics standard measures something completely different. Whether your body performs as one connected system, under fatigue, without the luxury of resting between movements. And there's a reason this specific comparison hits differently than a random "could a bodybuilder pass a fitness test" thought experiment. Johnson has spent his entire adult life training at a level almost nobody else has access to. If gaps still show up in a physique built under those conditions, that tells you something important about what heavy lifting alone does and doesn't build, regardless of how much time or money gets thrown at it. So today we're taking 5 real, documented military fitness standards, the same ones a 50-year-old soldier has to actually hit. Some of these he'd probably crush without blinking. Others would expose exactly the kind of gap that heavy lifting alone never fixes. Before we get into standard 1, if you want real, honest breakdowns like this instead of empty hype, subscribe now. This channel exists to compare the legends to the actual standards. Standard 1. The hand release push-up. Full hands off the ground reset at the bottom of every rep. No bounce, no momentum, dead stop every single time. Johnson's own publicly shared training leans heavily on machine presses and dumbbell work for his shoulders and chest. Here's the honest read. A man carrying his level of chest and shoulder development almost certainly has the raw pushing strength to grind out a strong number here. But raw strength and hand-release push-up efficiency aren't identical. The dead stop reset punishes anyone who's used to training with momentum-assisted machines instead of pure bodyweight control. This is the standard he'd probably pass comfortably, but not necessarily as easily as his size alone would suggest. There's a specific reason machine-trained pressing strength doesn't transfer one-to-one into this event. A seated machine press supports your torso and stabilizes the movement path for you. The hand-release push-up asks your shoulders, core, and hips to do that stabilizing work themselves, rep after rep, with your entire body weight as the load. Standard 2, the plank hold. 60-second minimum, forearms down, dead straight line from shoulders to heels, 0 sagging tolerated. Johnson's documented ab work leans on Russian twists and weighted leg raises. Real core training, but built around movement and load, not sustained isometric endurance under total body fatigue. This is genuinely the standard where a heavy lifting background can quietly work against you. This would be a real, legitimate test for a frame built primarily around moving heavy weight through short ranges of motion. Add in the sheer amount of additional muscle mass a frame like his is carrying, and the plank actually gets harder, purely from a leverage standpoint. More mass sitting on top of the same core means more load that core has to stabilize for the full 60 seconds. Standard 3, the standing power throw. A 10-pound medicine ball launched backward and overhead for maximum distance. A single explosive burst requiring legs, hips, core, and shoulders to fire together instantly. This is actually where a background like Johnson's has a real advantage. Heavy compound lifting builds a strong foundation of raw force production that transfers reasonably well into a single explosive movement like this one. This is likely the standard he'd handle best of all 5. And it's worth understanding why. Explosive power built through years of athletic performance doesn't disappear the way it does for a man who spent decades exclusively doing slow, controlled gym machine work. This is actually the most important nuance in this entire comparison, and it applies well beyond Johnson specifically. An athletic background from earlier in life leaves a lasting imprint on your nervous system's ability to fire explosively. Even decades later, men over 40 who played sports growing up often retain more of this explosive quality than they realize, simply because the body never fully unlearns a skill like that. This next standard is honestly the one that would separate size from actual function. So if you're enjoying this breakdown, subscribe now and comment below which legend you want compared to these standards next. Standard 4, the sprint drag carry. 5 back-to-back 80-yard shuttles. Sprint, sled drag, lateral shuffle, loaded carry, final sprint, with almost no rest between any of them. Here's the uncomfortable truth for any heavily built physique, regardless of who's wearing it. Extra muscle mass is extra mass you have to move, sprint, and drag through 5 consecutive stations with your heart rate already redlined from the previous one. Johnson's listed daily cardio, 30 to 50 minutes of running, genuinely helps his case here more than most men over 40 with a similar frame would have working in their favor, since most heavy lifters skip cardio almost entirely. This would likely be the closest call of all 5 standards. Enough conditioning base to survive it, but a frame that's carrying real extra mass through every single station. The kind of standard where the outcome could genuinely go either way depending on the day. Worth noting here too, grip strength under fatigue is a real, separate limiting factor most men never even consider. You can have plenty of raw grip strength for a single heavy deadlift and still watch that grip give out on the loaded carry portion of this event. Strength in isolation and strength under compounding fatigue are two very different tests. Standard 5, the 3-repetition maximum deadlift. 140 pounds for 3 controlled reps as the baseline standard. For a man who's built an entire public career around visible, functional strength, this number is almost laughably low relative to what he's certainly capable of lifting. This is the one standard on this entire list that isn't really a question at all. If anything, this standard exists to catch men who've neglected strength entirely, not to challenge anyone who's spent real time under a barbell. So here's the honest verdict across all 5. Physique built the way Johnson's is built would likely dominate the power throw and the deadlift without much concern, handle the push-up solidly, and face genuine, real uncertainty on the plank and the sprint drag carry. The two standards that specifically punish size without matching conditioning and isometric endurance underneath it. 3 confident passes, 2 genuine question marks. That's not a bad scorecard for any 50-year-old. Most men his age wouldn't confidently pass a single one of these 5 standards. But it's also not the flawless sweep his physique alone might lead you to assume. And that gap between assumption and reality is exactly the point of running this comparison in the first place. And that's really the entire lesson buried inside this comparison for every man over 40 watching. You can look like a superhero standing still in a mirror and still discover real gaps the moment your body's tested as one connected system instead of one muscle group at a time. Size alone was never the full picture. The fix isn't abandoning heavy lifting. Nobody's suggesting that, least of all this channel. It's adding the 2 or 3 things a pure lifting split quietly leaves out. Genuine isometric core work and some form of layered conditioning that stacks fatigue on top of fatigue instead of resting fully between every single set. Even 1 session a week built around those 2 gaps closes most of the distance for the average man over 40. 5 standards. A verdict on what heavy lifting alone builds, what it quietly leaves out, and exactly where the gap sits for most men over 40, training the exact same way he does.